time for another block party video, and this is the June block, and it looks like this. I don't have the other two here in front of me because they are already in quilts, but this is the one I have to make yet. But we will show you a view of all three of them in here so that you can see what they look like. Okay, this month we have several techniques to work on, and I'm going to show you the fast flying geese because I don't think we've done much of that this year. So I'll do that as a review for some of you. Then we have a pinwheel to make and a square and a square unit. So for your fast flying geese method here, I'm going to put my two dark squares on top of the background rectangle, and I don't know if you can see that, it's awfully dark, but that's laid on top of there. And if you have a dark fabric, you're going to need a really light pencil, and you draw the line right along there, and then you're going to sew on each side of the line. So that is what I have done here. Okay, and then we're going to cut that in half. And we have 2 units now, which it says in your instructions, so don't get confused when I say 2, because you're probably thinking, well, we need 4 flying geese. So I'm going to press these this way with the seam towards the darker fabric, the smaller triangles, and then I'll be right back. Okay, now I'm going to lay another dark square on there and one on here. And I'm going to draw the line again. And again, I'm going to sew on either side of the line. The next thing I'm going to do is cut along that line right there. And we have a flying geese unit. Actually, we have 4 flying geese units. So these need to be pressed again, and then we will trim them up. And when you put your iron on here to press these out, take your iron and go this way with it gently. Don't just go right on top, or you could possibly end up with little tucks in there, and you don't want that. You want it nice and flat in there. So I'm going to show you a few different methods for scoring these up. Let's start with the Ultimate Flying Geese ruler. So this is a 6. The pattern says to cut this 6.5 by 3.5 inches for a 6 by 3 inch unit, finished unit. Okay, on the Ultimate Flying Geese instructions, they go by the finished measurements on here. So where it says 3 by 6, it's a white line. I don't know if it shows up on there. And that's what you'll use. So don't look for 3.5 by 6.5. You go 3 by 6, because that's the measurement of the finished unit once it's already sewed in the block. So I'm going to take this and put that on there. You can see the white lines. The 3 by 6 has a little F at the top because these are alphabetized across here. So I'm going to put the F up there, and I want these lines to go right on my seam line. I'll adjust that if I need to. The white line is right on the seam line. So I'm going to trim this on 2 sides, like that. Turn your unit around, or the whole mat if you can do that. Then I'm going to turn the flying geese unit around, or the flying geese ruler around, and I'm going to use, again, the 3 by 6 measurement. It's cutting it 3.5 by 6.5. Okay, I've got my corners right there on the seam line, and I still have my little corner, F corner up there on the corner of the block. Okay, cut that off and that. Okay, we got one of them cut out. I'm going to show you how to do it using your wing clipper, if that's what you have. So here we have 6.5 by 3.5. Wing clipper does not use the 6 by 3 numbers. It goes 6.5 by 3.5 because that's what you're cutting it. Okay, so I'm going to put that on there, and this little X right here is going to go right up there at the top, and then this line is going to come down here. Whoops, get that up there. There we go. Okay, before I start cutting, I'm going to make sure that it's pretty well evenly divided around here so that my lines are within the block unit here. Also, I'm going to check to make sure that these lines are right there on the seam line. So I'm going to move that up a little, adjust that. And I still have my 1/4 inch seam allowance at the top there. So 6.5 by 3.5 here. I'm going to trim off these two edges. I let that slide. That's a no-no. Okay, and I'm going to turn this around. Okay, put my 6.5 by 3.5 on there. Turn this a little bit. Get a better angle on it. Okay, got our second one cut out. Now, if you don't have those and you want to just use your Creative Grids ruler, you can do it that way. So I'm going to lay my unit here. I want it 6.5, got my 1/2 inch measurement, and then it starts 1, 2, 3. 1/2 inch, and then goes all the way up to 6 over 6.5 here. Okay, so I'm going to put that on there, and I'm going to have it so that my 6.5 inch and 3.5 inch lines are inside the unit. And I'm going to put that one right there on the seam line. This one goes over here on the seam line. Okay, that's the only place I can lay it on here where it will be on the seam line. If I move it up, it won't be. There's no way that both of these will be on the seam line. If I move it down, they won't be on the seam line. So if these are both on the seam line right here, then naturally your 1/4 inch seam allowance will be 1/4 inch above the tip of the triangle up here. Okay. 3.5, 6.5, 3.5, 6.5. Hold this down. Okay, turn that around. Turn my ruler around. See here, we got that. We need to trim up. Okay, 6.5 over here, 3.5 down here. These lines are laid on my edges that I just cut. And I'm going to double check to make sure that my angled lines on the ruler are right there on the seam line, and that this comes right on the seam line. Okay, so we've got 3 of them done. Another way to do it is with the block lock, and I'm not going to cut this out because my block lock ruler is too small for this, but it has the little grooves on the back, and it will just lock right in there. I can put it in there, I pull it this way, it comes out, but push it up that way, it goes in. So if I was going to trim this, these just naturally come right out to the edge. But to do this, you would have to have the 3.5 by 6.5 inch block lock Flying Geese ruler to do that. Put it on there, cut these 2 sides, turn around here, cut these other 2 sides, and you're going to have a perfect little unit again. Okay, the next thing you need to make is this little pinwheel unit. And to do that, you're going to make your 1/2 square triangles, and we're going to just trim them up with, you can use a Creative Grids ruler, or you can use a block lock 1/2 square triangle trimmer upper. And got this on here, 2.5 inches. We've given you plenty of room to trim these up. We don't want you to have to worry about them being too small. Okay, so turn this over here. We've done this many times, so probably pretty good at this by now. That's right on there. The seam line goes right to the corner. Trim that up and do that to all 4 of them. And then you will sew them together into a pinwheel unit like this. And it should measure 4.5 inches by 4.5 inches. If it's a little bit big, then just put your put your ruler on there and trim off any excess, even if it's just shaving off a little tiny bit. Okay, the next set of instructions on here is to take that pinwheel and sew on the corner triangles to make a little square and a square block. Okay, before I go on, I want to mention that I just use solid colors and they don't have anything to do with the colors in the blocks. So even though this one is similar to the Cape Cod, don't be confused by the color choices that I have in here. Okay, so this is going to go on here. We have 4 of these. You're going to take 2 4-inch squares, cut each in half once, okay? Don't cut them twice, cut them once. And then you will take one of these and you're going to sew it on here. To make sure it's centered, I'm going to put the corner of the triangle right there on the seam line and put that right on there like that. And then sew my 1/4-inch seam. Sew this one over here. Okay, how do I know if it's straight? Push that aside. Sew that one over here. Pin these down if you need to as you go along. You're going to sew those 2 on that side. Then after that's done, you're going to press these open and sew 2 more on. So I've sewed these on 2 opposite sides, and now I'm going to sew the other 2 on. But before I do, I'm going to trim off these little dog ears sticking out over here. So I'm just going to take my ruler. You could trim it with the scissors if you want, and just cut those off. All right, get them out of the way because if your presser foot might get kind of hung up on those when you go to sew these on. So just get them out of the way and you have a nice straight line there. And I'm going to put these on here like this. And go over to the machine. Move that over again, and I just messed that one up. Or you could fold this in half. Press a little crease in there, and then that's where it will go on the line. Okay, so I sewed my other 2 sides on. Now, I was so excited to show you the block instructions this month because we did a really cool thing with the square and a square unit that we have here, even though it's a pinwheel in a square. But I'm going to take my 6-inch ruler. I have to go find one. I'm back with my 6.5-inch square ruler. Now you don't have to use a square one. You could use a rectangle ruler, but you would want it to be at least 6.5 inches in either direction. You could use an 8 or a 10 or 12-inch square to square this up if you wanted to. You could even use this big 8.5-inch by 24.5. The problem with that is it's kind of bulky and awkward and gets in the way, and because you might bump it, it could throw you off. So I suggest small rulers to have on hand. But the 6.5-inch is perfect for this because it's divided down the middle. So it's divided at 3 1/4 by 3 1/4. This is going to go on here, and I'm going to trim this up. There we go. Got it centered on there. And this one's going to go over here. These are already cut. I'll trim this one up. And the nice thing about this is you have more than 1/4 inch there. So you're not going to have to worry about the corner of your pinwheel square being caught in your seam. Let me show you here on this one. There is probably another almost 1/4 inch past where this is sewn in. So you could have, close to 1/2 inch extra around there. So your pinwheel unit is floating inside this square here. And that keeps you, like I said, from having them cut off. Okay, that's it for the June block party block of the month.